22 of Light on Leeds podcast features Rachael Unsworth, an urban geographer whose company, Leeds City Walking Tours, takes people on walks across the city. Rachael knows such a lot about Leeds. If you'd like to learn more, you could do worse than getting hold of the book Leeds, Cradle of Innovation, which Rachael and Steve Burt put together. Have a listen. Welcome to episode 21 of Light on Leeds, and today we have Rachael Unsworth. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming along.
My pleasure.
So, Rachael, to start with, I met you when you were preparing to do one of your tours, the Leeds City Walking Tours. Can you tell us how did you get into doing that?
I'm an urban geographer.
Wow.
Always been a geographer, even before I knew what the term was, and studied geography, did a PhD, went into commercial property research, then happened to come back to Yorkshire, spent most of my childhood in Yorkshire, didn't know Leeds at all at the time, but then I got a part-time lectureship at the university and started using Leeds as the obvious example on the doorstep and took students out into the city. And then was asked to do other tours occasionally for geographical associations and sixth forms and community groups. But we can fill in some of the backstory, but ended up, thinking, right, what next? So beginning of last year, started doing the tours for real, as it were, and I've done nearly 100 tours,
wow.
Loads of different topics, and it's all good fun.
So did you get people who want to go on particular types of tours?
Yes, so I do the general introductory ones where people know nothing about Leeds, and we start off by the Minster and we see how far we can get in a couple of hours, which is amazingly not very far, the time goes so quickly. And then through to all kinds of specialist topics about regeneration, the retail history, and then things like I have private clients, so I hosted Eurocities in the autumn.
Oh, wow.
We had 58 different cities represented. Now, I didn't take all of the people on one tour, but we divvied it up, That was really interesting. So sort of a critical take on how Leeds is developed and what more lies ahead. And then I took a tour of over 40 people from Sustrans who do sustainable transport stuff, walking and cycling. And they were having their annual shindig in Leeds. So I devised a special route for them. We picked them up from the hotel and thought about where we'd finish. The food hall at Kirkgate, because it's really good for big groups, and then devised the route so that it would all fit within the time available. So really good fun.
Brilliant. And so is there anything, is there a particular fact that you discovered about Leeds that interested you the most, or is it just, are you interested in it as a whole?
Yeah, well, that's the point, actually. So my dear old, late lamented friend, Professor Maurice Beresford, it's his centenary this year, and he was an economic historian and I'm an urban geographer, but we've sort of met in the middle, and we studied the history of the office district together, and I'm just about to do a tour on what would have been his 100th birthday on that topic. And his phrase was a lovely one about the open-air museum, the open-air exhibition that is Leeds. Yeah. And so often I can arrange so that on whatever theme we've got an eyeful of different eras of buildings, different kinds of building stone, even down to the different schemes of laying bricks, all within one eyeful. And that's what fascinates me, how you can read the way the city's developed from just studying the stuff around you, and how the different sites and buildings, they may be completely different from what was there before, or there may be an amazing continuity. And so I did a lovely tour last year, and did it for the last time just between Christmas and New Year, Leeds in 1819.
Right.
And we used the map from 1815, and I stuck to routes so you could have walked using that map.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And everything just stayed exactly the same?
Well, but everything to each side so different, but the river's still there, the canal's still there, and we started down in Holbeck and went along Water Lane and in front of Asda, so we're still on Water Lane. That was really interesting to do, and we've got other good sources from that time as well. So really I try to bring the streets alive, bring the buildings alive, help people to almost do time travel, but be back in time for tea.
Yeah, that's perfect. Can you tell us anything about the history of Beeston? Do you know much about the history of Beeston?
Now, I haven't actually studied Beeston. My friend and co-author of Cradle of Innovation is doing the history of the out townships as they were known. So he's doing Holbeck and Hunslet and Beeston. And it was a separate little place until recently, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. You know, out on the hill beyond Leeds, and you tramp down over the fields to get to the town as it was until so recently.
I think that Beeston was actually a town before Leeds was. I read that. I'm not sure if it's 100% true.
Well, it depends what you call a town, doesn't it?
I suppose, yeah. With the other urban geographers, I'm sure you could tell me more about those categories.
So I do want to develop some tours in the areas beyond the city centre. I do a few of those. I've done some for Left Bank Leeds. So I've done the route between Kirkstall Abbey and Cardigan Road. You know, why is Cardigan Road called that? You know, what are the links between that and the Abbey? So that's an interesting story. And then I've done Kirkstall Valley between the Viaduct and the Inner Ring Road.
Yeah, a lot of history there.
Yes, the dye works and tanneries and the alphabet streets and all that. And then now what's there and what's shaping up for the future. And then I did ages ago a tour of Richmond Hill and that area, Cross Green and so on, because we'd done research in the inner city with a little group of us, a mixture of academics and architects and activists and so on. And that was an interesting one. But I would like to do more tours of inner city areas with people who know the inside story. So rather than me coming in and pretending to know all about it, it would be great to find the people who've lived and worked in the area and know it from the inside.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, and I bet you can still find lots of people who've got all sorts of stories.
So I want to work with Joe Williams in Chapeltown, for instance,
right,
who's done the Black History in Leeds and does this amazing tour of the university campus, drawing out, the missing history.
Yeah, the stuff that you don't necessarily get to hear about.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I do a tour in the city centre called Lost Leeds.
Right.
The vanished gems and dreams that went up in smoke or whatever.
Right.
And so that's an interesting one to hook it on. It's the closest I get to doing a ghost tour.
You've never come across any ghosts on any of your tours then?
No, they flee, and the sound of my hideously loud voice, presumably.
And so, have you ever had people on your tours that have come along and told you some facts that you didn't know?
Oh yeah, it's often the case. People say, "Oh, I used to work there," or "My dad used to be there," and I pick up some nice little gems quite often. There's a chap who lives in Shadwell, and his parents were Jewish immigrants, and I think grandparents actually, and he comes and he quite often says, "Rachel, I could just say something about this building."
Oh, lovely! That's fantastic. Yeah. There's a great documentary actually on. I'm not sure if it's still on there, but on iPlayer, and it's all about the Jewish history in Leeds, and it's really fascinating.
Oh yes, because we were about this time 100 years ago, there were more Jews in Leeds than anywhere else in England except for London.
Wow.
Yeah. It was just because so many people came from the Baltic ports into Hull, and it was said, they were working their way across, and many of them intended to go from Liverpool to the New World. And some of them perhaps didn't realise they weren't in America, but I don't think that can be true of many people. But of course, by the time there were a few people established in Leeds, then other people who stopped off along the way to earn a bit more money to get the passage, they'd have had a welcome from the people who were already here, and they'd have thought, well, we might as well stop here. No, they'd have said it like that.
No, but we're all glad they did.
Well, indeed. So many of those people who came in the late 19th century into the early 20th century, they're amongst the kind of second, third generation of innovators who feature in our book, Leeds Cradle of Innovation.
Yeah.
So we've, of course, got Michael Marks, who teamed up with the local chap, Tom Spencer, and we've got... the chap who turned his name into Montague Burton.
All right, he turned his name. So what was he originally?
Oh heck, I knew you were going to say that, and I can't pronounce it. So.
People can look that up.
Yeah, that's right. So he started with nothing, except a very good education, and he had Hebrew and Russian, but hardly any English at first. But he was so canny, and he built up this business, Burton, the tailor of taste, and by 100 years ago had the biggest clothing factory anywhere, And so there are amazing stories to tell.
Yeah. And so you mentioned your book, Leeds Cradle of Innovation, and I was telling you that I happened to be looking up the Salem Church because it's just such a beautiful building and I pass it quite often. So I'll have a little look on Wikipedia and find out what that was about. And it mentions you launching your book there.
Yes, on that very hot June night in 2018. Yeah, because Adam Beaumont, who's the astonishing entrepreneur who owns that building, he's also a director of Leeds Sustainable Development Group, which is the group we used as the sort of publisher of the book. So he supported the book in every way. You know, he was on the board of the little community interest company. He sponsored the book and then ended up sponsoring the launch. And that was a great moment because he has in that building the most extraordinary new use for an old chapel, the oldest bit of which is from the 1790s, and it's now the internet hub for the north of England.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Such a reuse of such an old building that's got such great history. Because
that's right.
Is Leeds United were formed there? Is that
they
correct?
Were, yes, 100 years ago last autumn, yes.
Wow. Yeah. And so, can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you have included in your book?
Well, it's all kinds of innovations. It's not just, as I put it, clever bits of kit invented by blokes years ago. It's also changes of process, changes of ways of doing things. And so we've got... There is a lot of engineering in the early bit and some marvellous stuff, that came, including, and I'm on a mission to really big up Matthew Murray, the very first locomotive anywhere, as I'm sure
amazing,
you know.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, but not enough people do know. And even people who are Leeds through and through, they may have heard of Matthew Murray vaguely because of having been the school, which is just now empty space, isn't it? But they don't quite realise the significance that the locomotive he was commissioned to make, that was the first time anybody had taken a stationary steam engine concept and turned it into a thing that moved and could haul stuff. My, what a breakthrough, a dozen years before the Stockton Darlington.
Yeah.
And so, I'm wanting us to have, by 2026, which will be the bicentenary of his death, a major piece of artwork, hopefully designed by a mixture of current day engineers and students.
That'd be amazing.
And using the latest energy technology, because I think Murray would have approved of that. He'd been onto it, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
So, so the South Leeds Life and John Howe and people are helping me to promote that idea. And I'm already on to Network Rail to try to find the right place for it, perhaps. We may have a copy of it or another version down in Holbeck itself, near the Round Foundry, where he had his engineering works next to Marshall's.
And why do you think he's not so well remembered?
Because the railway for which he made that first locomotive was only, in massive inverted commas, a colliery railway to bring the coals from Middleton into the middle of town.
Right.
To great advantage for Leeds to have that cheap coal. And so because it wasn't for passengers, it didn't get that visibility, did it?
No.
And then Leeds was shrouded in coal smoke, so it was even less visibility.
Yeah, of course. And so, can you tell us about any of the other people?
Well, we've got so many different categories. So we've got all the inventors of the industrial period, but including Benjamin Gott, who wasn't an inventor. He was actually inventor of a new way of doing things. So the very first woolen mill anywhere, which was on the site where the Yorkshire Post newspapers then went. 50 years ago this year, they moved to that site. So that's an interesting one. And then we've got all sorts of different kinds of printers. And the person who predated Burton the Tailor of Taste in inventing ready-made clothing, John Barron, whose extraordinary workshop and factory is there still in Park Square.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Amazing building with the minarets. Yeah. That was built as an industrial premises. Can you believe?
Goodness, because it's so beautiful,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, he was part of that Victorian thing where the people who'd done well in industry and were proud of what they'd done were also keen to beautify the city. And
thank goodness they did.
Yeah, so, with the town hall, the people arguing for a grand building, now just re-emerging from its box scaffolding, they won the day, and John Barron was keen to show off his works and add something beautiful to the city as well. So hence all the twiddly bits. And
well, I saw as you were flicking there, you had John Marshall. Is that the John Marshall of Marshall's Mill?
That's right.
I mean, that is just one of my favourite buildings in the whole of Leeds. That's the Egyptian temple replica.
That's right.
How did that come about?
Because there was a fashion for people being rather exotic and doing something that would be remarkable with their works, and they'd already built up a lot of wealth. So it was the second generation of the Marshall family who were in charge by the 1830s, and it didn't end until a few years after that. And they wanted to make something really special and do something different from the traditional 6-storey brick mills. Well, we've still got the last example of that we still call Marshall's Mill. So they decided to do a 1-storey mill, something completely different, a very interesting break with the past there. But it was never apparently completely fully occupied by flax spinning activity. And in fact, from the 1850s, flax spinning went down as an industry. And the Marshall business ended up being sold in the 1880s, and the place has never been fully used ever since then.
It's a massive shame, isn't it? Do you know what's actually happening with it at the minute?
Well, it's now owned by Commercial Estates Group, CEG, who own a lot of the land around there. They're doing some big new build developments. They're very keen to find a new use for it. Here on my bag you see Temple LS1 1.1.
Yes, I've heard about
this. LS11, but and they're very much wanting to make it safe because it's in a perilous physical state, and then find an ongoing use for it.
Yeah, that would be great.
It's, people have tried various things over the years. I'd love it to be part of a region-wide visitor economy phenomenon of textiles, clothing and fashion, and to be hooked into other places within the city region as well, and really make them all sing. It's so often the case with the history of Leeds itself. The more people were doing things here, the more people were attracted here, and the more happened. And we still have that. It's curious in this day and age. You can do anything anywhere, can't you, with a phone and a computer, except that people still like to cluster, and they still get benefits out of being cheek by jowl with other folk, either doing similar things or different things. Supply lines and workforce and access to this, that and the other. So it's still, we've got this ecology of innovation here. So I keep getting sidetracked. Who is surprised by that? Serially tangential. So many different innovations here, including the medical innovations. LGI, as you know, so many famous medics of various kinds associated with that. And then we also got reformers. So many of the basic things that needed to be sorted out in the 19th century, there were people from Leeds who were in the forefront of that, so we've included some of them. We haven't gone on into the 20th century with all that, because where would you stop? So there's another whole book on that, as there is another whole book on the university to do innovation forever. It's coming up in 2024, it'll be 150 years since the Yorkshire College of Science was founded.
Oh, really?
So, anyone out there who'd like to commission a special edition?
They just need to get in touch with you.
That's right. And then we've got this wonderful section called Leeds Legends, which is things that have been around forever and without which, Leeds wouldn't be the place that it is. Including the Middleton Railway that's still there.
And I can still quite often hear the trains from here, which is a lovely thing to hear. Hear the steam trains.
Yes, it's amazing, isn't it? And the Leeds Library, the Fill and Lit, I'm on the council of the Fill and Lit now, so they're just going to their 3rd century, so we're thinking up ideas for particularly how to make the most of this august institution that's been going for so long in the realm of connecting the sciences and the arts. So the aforementioned thing for Matthew Murray, I hope the Fill and Lit will be supporting that. I know that one of the people on council who's a mechanical engineer is really keen on the idea, and that they will help to stimulate people to get involved in that as a project.
That's really something to look forward to, isn't it?
So, still relevant today. And the also we've got various companies that have been going for a very long time. Some of them still are. So we've got giants of the past, but we've also got living legends. Including A.W. Hainsworth out at Stanningley Bottom.
All right.
They've just won a prize in the China Business Forum for their exports to China, including a snooker tablecloth and piano felt.
Oh,
who knew?
Oh, wow!
There's so many pianos being made in China now. Many of them for the home market, but many of them for export. And Hainsworths are the people producing the felt for the.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Wonderful. So many stories of historic organisations, companies, but also then in the contemporary section, so varied, and things that people in 19th century, 18th century Leeds would have gone, you what? Well, I never. But some of them, as you were mentioning before about Salem Chapel, using the same spaces, but doing completely different things. So there's, in here we've got, in the digital sector, we've got this chap, Guy Redwood, who's in Marshall's Mill.
Oh, yeah.
And he's doing this amazing, sophisticated stuff on how people use websites. So able to track the way eyes move around websites and then play it back to people and get them to talk through what was going through their head while they were reading that website and using it. And then capturing that information to help with improving the structuring and functioning of websites. So, in a space that was for spinning flax.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Amazing.
So then we've got a bit on the green economy. If you're going to ask me about, well, what could be better about Leeds, more of the same. So we can come on to that later. And then there's the bit on the university, not enough. Hence the need for a whole section. And then this massive section on culture.
Oh, wow.
This is a picture here. I'm showing Hazel of the of part of Carnival Messiah, which was one of the great things to come out of Leeds. Celebrating our links with culture of other parts of the world through the medium of Handel's Messiah.
Yeah, there's just so many amazing cultures in Leeds. It's one of the things that I really love about it, and I feel like I've learned so much more from living here and being involved with different people from different cultures. I think it's something that the city does really well.
Absolutely. So that was one I was going to answer your question about what do you particularly value about Leeds. I was going to say exactly that. The diverse economy, and we've always benefited from that, always being able to adapt and go into the next thing and draw on so many different things that are already here, and that diverse population. So, and that's happened in different stages of the Irish and the Jewish and the West Indians and South Asians, and then we've had so many different people come in, haven't we, since the turn of the millennium?
Yeah,
and many people being welcomed and feeling welcomed.
Yeah.
My own sister, who's just come to live in Leeds from West Wales, where she was from the early 90s, has felt such a warm welcome here in Leeds. And the folk chat to her at the bus stop and on the bus, and they'll have a right laugh. And she smokes outside the pub, and there are nurses there from the hospital who are joining in with having a laugh as well. So a wonderful, varied place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pity when we have the odd flashpoint of things that go wrong, but Leeds has been amazing at managing to tackle some of that, and some of that has been done by a group. I know one of your other interviewees, Ed Carlisle, has been involved in Together for Peace, and I interviewed the founder of Together for Peace.
Oh, brilliant.
And here we are right at the end of the book in the section that's on social enterprises, and all the amazing work they've done bringing people together. And with people representatives from, say, Hamara near here, and other groups, and the mosques and the Hindu temple that's tucked away not far from Left Bank Leeds. All these places that people don't necessarily know about. And he's done such wonderful work strengthening the links between communities.
Because it's Together for Peace who do it's like a religion walk. So you go around and you experience all the different places of worship.
Yes.
What a great idea.
Yes, isn't it just?
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for people who've met one-to-one and actually spoken with people from very different backgrounds. It's hard to maintain fear or worse, isn't it?
Yes, I think you're right about that. I think realising that we're all humans, whether
Yes.
whether we do some aspects of our lives slightly different than others is beside the point, you know. And it's one of the things that I love about Beeston. You know, I have neighbours next door who are Romanian. I have neighbours over the road who are Afghanistani, and it's fantastic. And I love the fact that, you know, we all speak to each other, and there's a real community feel in Beeston, and a huge variety of different people. And it's one of the things that I absolutely value the most.
Great, that's lovely to hear. Well, I did my PhD about Pakistanis in Britain and did my case study in Slough, and started interviewing people in rooms like this, in terraced houses in Slough, all those years ago, and so overcame my sense of it being a rather strange thing to do as a little English girl from villages in Yorkshire, and again was welcomed by everybody.
Yeah, that's a lovely thing about Leeds, and it's brilliant.
So this is the book, available from Waterstones and direct from us, the Leeds Sustainable Development Group. So you can go to 46 The Calls, just by the Centenary Bridge, and they sell it direct over the counter there.
And so what's that group that you just mentioned that you're part of?
Leeds Sustainable Development Group, set up by an architect 10 years ago, who was very concerned that we weren't moving fast enough on the sustainability agenda, and we decided to focus on the South Bank as this huge area that, you know, when it's all done, it'll effectively double the size of the city centre.
Yeah.
So much of it wasn't yet properly thought through in terms of how it could be reworked for the 21st century. And we made a case, look, this could be a sustainable neighbourhood for the long term, with people being able to live, work and do whatever within this area, or within walking and cycling distance. And we managed to make some change happening, including getting the secondary school to come in there, Ruth Gorse Academy.
Oh wow, is that part of
world-class school, outstanding school.
Yeah, it's an amazing
right.
building.
Yeah, and we supported Chris Thompson, who's doing the Climate Innovation District just downstream, and they're going to have a primary school on their site. So then that's a game changer. So we think, probably if you interviewed people from CEG, who own so much of the land in Holbeck, as I was mentioning, and Vastin, who now own the Tetley site, and other landowners there, I think having schools there has enabled them to be bold about thinking, right, there will be a market for housing, there will be a market for other kinds of property here, because we've got some of the building blocks in place, and we will have a park. So the Tetley site, you know, is being done so that it'll be buildings within a parkland setting. It's going to be called Air Park.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. I mean, I'd heard about the scheme, but Air Park, that's nice.
It's a nice one, isn't it? Simple.
Yeah. Oh wow.
It'll be the first proper substantial green space that we've had for the city centre since Park Square was laid out in the late 18th century.
Really?
Yeah, so we did have temporary green space at Wellington Place during the recession. Bless them, they decided they would go with our idea of having a lawn and allotment beds and fruit trees and all, and they did that. But then they've had to, you know, it's been squished to the side now. They've been building out the site, but they have created quite a lot of good public realm within the centre of the site now. But yeah, we've been lacking in green space. That's one of the things I was going to say, you know, things that could be better in Leeds. But it's partly because of, you know, it's the downside of being successful.
Yeah.
That the land that was supposed to be another huge area of open space, Park Row, South Parade, East Parade, all that was, the idea was, back in the 18th century, that would be another big open space.
Oh,
but
really?
Too valuable.
Yeah.
You know, the town was growing, the number of people, the number of industries, and that was too attractive to carve that up into streets. And then when the railways came, that whole area became the warehouse district, so the business-to-business premises, and you can still see some of those wonderful neo-Gothic kind of Venetian almost buildings down between Wellington Street and Park Square.
Yeah, you can. I mean, that whole Wellington Place area has just expanded so quickly in the last couple of years. It's unbelievable. It
is, that's right. But you could look back at 200 years ago and people would have said, hey, town's changing that fast, I can't keep up with it. And in fact, the rate of population growth was never as rapid as it was between 1811 and 1831. Obviously, it was from a low base.
Yeah.
But still, the town was growing really fast from the middle of the 18th century onwards, but we only had the census from 1801. Anyway, yeah, so But everybody's always thought that their time was of an unprecedentedly rapid change, I think.
Yeah.
We just had that sluggish bit in the middle of the 20th century where Leeds actually lost population, along with a lot of other British and other Western places. You know, when industry was being set up in other parts of the world and undercutting our industry, there were many of these giants of the past who must have thought they were going to be there forever, but they weren't. And they're scraped off the face of the earth, and there's hardly anything to tell now when you go to these sites. For instance, you know, the formerly famous half square mile of Hunslet, where they made the locomotives following on from Matthew Murray. You know, many people who trained under him then created their own companies or went to work for some people who had set up other companies. And from those businesses, over the period from the middle of the 19th century through to the late 20th century, maybe 19,000 locomotives come out.
Wow.
Yeah.
We watched a documentary and it was in India, and we were amazed to see trains with Hunslet written on the side. They're all over the world.
That's right, yes. Periodically people sending pictures saying, oh, found this rusting thing in a quarry or a mine or a plantation or whatever. Yes, they weren't just for mainline use, they were for all sorts.
Yeah, definitely. And when you have a walk around Leeds, are there particular buildings that you are more interested in, or you think are the most spectacular or have the most amazing histories?
Ooh, well, that's so many questions all because they're not necessarily the same thing. Sometimes they all coincide, but there are very unspectacular buildings that have amazing background,
right.
Things that are very humble, and then there are the spectacular, when the Broderick buildings, the Broderick trio have to be the tops, don't they? Yeah. The Corn Exchange, the Town Hall, and the museum buildings. So yeah, they're really remarkable in every way, and you know, still very much in active use, as though two of them are rather different from what they're intended to be.
Because what was the museum originally?
Well, it was built as the Mechanics Institute in the days before there was proper education beyond, well, there wasn't a proper statutory education until 1870, you know, and if you were from a working class background, there's no way you'd go to grammar school, or there was only Oxford and Cambridge, and that was only for Church of England folk, and only if you could afford it, you know.
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, so definitely a lack of educational facilities. So many towns ended up, you know, starting one of these mechanics institutes, and there were several around and about Leeds. It wasn't just the one in the middle. And eventually they had enough money gathered that they could commission that special building. So for the education of, mostly for men, I have to say, in technical subjects, they had a library and they had lectures and so on. So then it became used when we did have an education system, it then fell out of use, so then it became used as the civic theatre.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And then redone as the museum. Well, we hadn't properly had a museum ever since the Luftwaffe let leash a bomb on Park Row back in 1941, and the front of the old museum was hit. And they did carry on with that building, I gather, but then all the museum stuff was put temporarily in the municipal buildings.
Because wasn't once the Leeds Museum part of the library?
Well, that's it.
Within it.
Well, that's it. So it was housed within the building that we know as the library, and we didn't have then a purpose-made museum until that Old Mechanics Institute was redone and opened in 2008.
Wow!
So there were people who grew up in Leeds after the war who never really knew a proper museum until they could take their grandchildren.
Well, what a shame! Yeah. Wow, amazing. Because I think that the library's served all sorts of purposes over the years, hasn't it?
Well, yes, part of it. Now, where you go in on the ground floor, the fiction bit, that was the office where people would turn up to pay their bills to the corporation. When the corporation finally did manage almost everything, having not been quick off the mark to clean up and organise the town. Right. They then ended up by the end of the 19th century. They ran the gas, the water, the sewage, the electricity, the trams. You know, the whole caboodle. Amazing. And then later on, got into providing housing as well. So it really was the do-it-all corporation.
And was that sort of across the whole of England? That kind of thing happened in different cities.
Yes, in different paces and in slightly different ways. Yes. After the Municipal Reform Act of 1835, when the local bodies of elected folk, men in those days, had more powers and responsibilities, and then gradually they gained more powers and responsibilities over time. It's an interesting story, though. You have to have some stamina for all the dates and the names and things.
So you've talked a lot about, obviously, the men in history. Can you tell us something about any famous Leeds women?
Well, there are those pioneering women who headed up the reforms in the 19th century, not just for women's votes, so there were famous ones amongst them. Leonora Cohen.
I've heard of Leonora Cohen.
Yeah, so here we've got this lovely section. So she was from a very poor background, and her mother struggled as a widow, and Leonora married and had a relatively comfortable life herself, but never forgot how much her mother had struggled. So she then took to the suffragette movement, and her famous thing was that she hid an iron bar under her coat and went into the Tower of London and threw it at the case containing the crown jewels. So she didn't harm people and she didn't harm private property, but she was aiming straight at the heart of the symbol of the state, as it were.
Yeah, wow.
But she was imprisoned, as many of them were, but later on she was rehabilitated. So here the entry says, Leonora Cohen, Justice of the Peace, OBE.
Oh, wow, she's become a Justice of the Peace.
Yeah, that's how close those women were to being in the right place. They made history speed up by their actions, but it was so much required that women had more of a active, proper participation in democracy and the running of all sorts of things. So there was and there was Mary Gawthorpe, who was also on that kind of thing, and there's Isabella Ford, who did much for the working women, and yes, not enough known about these people.
No.
Lucy Wilson, the redoubtable Miss Lucy.
I don't think I've heard of Miss Lucy.
Well, we've not got pictures of these people, annoyingly. They were not well sung in their time, and we didn't capture likenesses. She was born into a well-to-do family. The father had had a good business, and she had 4 brothers. And so she was one of the fortunate women who didn't have to marry.
Wow.
No way was she going to get married.
Nice place to be at that time.
That's right. So she campaigned on all the things that needed to be campaigned on. Votes, education, all sorts of, improving conditions for working classes. Yeah, so there were amazing people. But, so there could be another whole book done on women who've said, no, this isn't good enough, and we need to do things differently. And the first women to do this, that and the other, it would make a great book.
Yeah,
I dare say Mick
would.
McCann covered some of these things in his What Leeds Gave the World.
He did, yeah.
Is that the name of it? I always get it slightly
How
wrong.
Leeds Changed the World.
How Leeds Changed the World.
I think he is actually thinking of doing a second instalment, because obviously there's just so much to write about.
That's right. So I've very much pay homage to him in this book, as to many people who contributed. It was I compiled it. I did lots of writing as well, but it was drawing on so many different sources, including the wonderful Eve Bradford, who's done the profiles of people for North Leeds Life over the years, and they're now in the Thoresby Society archive, and you can get them online. So many people helped. It was a great project, real collaboration.
Yeah, fantastic, and I can't wait to have a look at it. So, you know so much about Leeds. What would you... I bet it must be very difficult for you to pick, but what would you say is the greatest thing about Leeds?
Well, I think, as we were saying before, about the diversity, that we've managed always to adapt and to create the next opportunities out of what there is already here, and then inviting people in to add to that, which we already do well.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound very spectacular, does it? But I do think that actually is a massive strength in diversity of the economy and of the population.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think it's part of what just makes us just an amazing place to be.
Mm.
And I know you're not going to say transport, 'cause it's been quoted so many times, but what would you say is something that's not so great about the city?
We've been slow to turn towards doing things in a greener way, to do more with less, to close the loops, bear down on resource intensity and pollution output. I mean, people are now getting the wind up about it. But Leeds was this allegedly environment city back in the early 90s.
Really?
We had a local Agenda 21 that everybody in the country, around the world, we were supposed to have them in place by the year 2000. And by 2020, we were supposed to have got to the point where everything we did and the way we organised everything would be integrating economy, environment and society, so that all decisions about investment and the way we do things would be minimising impact on the environment, minimising resource use, minimising pollution, maximising well-being, maximising the right kind of jobs. And instead of doing that, we've gone with too much of business as usual.
Right.
And too much kowtowing to, if we don't let them do this, they'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
No, if we'd had really firm stipulations and gone all out to be, a car-free city centre years ago, we'd have reaped the benefits of that. So this is, the arguments that the Leeds Sustainable Development Group was making about the South Bank. It's not too late, but we're getting to the point where so much environmental damage has been done that we're going to have to work incredibly hard now to do enough quickly enough.
Yeah.
So that's not so good. We really need to be bold. Be much bolder. I'll say no for the not even for the long term, for the short term. We need to deal with air pollution and the way we use resources. So there are great people doing things on like Rob Greenland and his social business on waste minimisation, and we've just been involved in a workshop on zero waste fashion. There are lots of keen people now wanting to not do maximum throughput of resources.
Yeah. Great. And can you tell us about a hidden gem that even if somebody had been a resident of Leeds for years and years, they might not have known about?
Many of these so-called hidden gems are actually in plain sight, but people don't spot them, and especially they don't look up. And people often say to me after tours, now I'll never go along a street again without looking up. You've really opened my eyes. So just little things like the wonderful unicorn on the corner of the old Yorkshire Penny Bank building, which is on the site where the old infirmary was, in Infirmary Street. We still call it that. And the various owls, of course. The cliff stead draws attention to. So there's the little unicorn.
That's a great photograph.
Smiling. Isn't it? So
that's beautiful.
Absolutely gorgeous. And then things like the first purpose-built office. People wouldn't know the significance of these things, so they're not hidden, but you wouldn't know. So that building that's on the corner of Commercial Street and Albion Street, that's now one of the big coffee chains. It was, as far as Morris and I could work out, the very first of the purpose-built offices from the very early 1850s for an insurance company, a local insurance company. And so the story I tell that I will be doing on the 6th of February is the story of how that came about, from people being invisible in the backyards behind Brigade to moving westwards and to eventually getting to the point where we have purpose-built offices. So other things that are hidden gems. Well, people now know the Leeds Library on Commercial Street. It's not as hidden as it was.
No, but still quite a lot of people have not heard of it, because you can walk past it and have no idea it's there, can't you?
Even though they've got a much more prominent entrance. It's Ambler did the new entrance and the new room at the back. New room, 1880s. We still call it the new room. But that's definitely a very unusual thing still to have a private subscription library.
It's so beautiful. I've been so lucky to get to go and have a look at it when I've been on a heritage tour, and I mean, it just feels like walking into something from a set at Hogwarts. Like a magical library with it's just a wonderful place, and they put all sorts of great talks and tours and things on there, don't they? They
do now, and there was one last night. James Rhodes, who's the great the On This Day man.
Well, he's coming to be on the podcast in a couple of weeks' time, so I'm very much looking forward to speaking to him.
Yes, that's right. Well, and it's lovely, the collaboration between those of us who are very keen on the heritage and putting across, things that people might not have known about the city. So we're all, we know there's plenty to go at. And we're all still learning, which is the lovely thing.
Yeah, that is great. Well, I shall put in the podcast notes links to your tours and to your website so that people can get involved and
Leeds City Walking Tours.
Leeds City Walking Tours. They can come along and have and be taught by you all the amazing things that they might never have known about. And thank you so much for coming along.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
What's happening in this great city? We'll tell you. Wait a minute.
Rachael Unsworth is a veritable mine of information about our great city. She can create bespoke tours of whatever area of Leeds history you're most interested in. She told me that she's more than once been someone's birthday present. Music this week is provided by Red Shakes with their debut single, Not the Same. Have a listen.